Welcome in, New Jersey wrestling fans, to On the Mat, presented by the Mat Pack here on the Sports Fan Base Network. We're going to look at all the information you need as the wrestling season gets underway here at the end of December and the beginning of January. So be sure to tune in after this. All right, it's time to get underway here. It's time to get on the mat with the Mat Pack. Brett Fetty and Mark Trible here with you, talking about everything New Jersey wrestling this season. We want to cover it all. And Brett, it's good to have you on, man.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a great season. Let's start, Brett, and take a look at the Beast of the East. Obviously, this is one of the most prestigious tournaments we have in New Jersey, where New Jersey athletes compete down in Delaware. We had 3 champions from New Jersey. Let's start off first and talk about the 106-pounder from Bergen Catholic.
Nick Kale was a 106-pounder who really didn't see varsity the whole year last year, but he stepped in this year because Howard had moved up, and he won the Beast of the East, which is, like I said, very prestigious tournament, very tough tournament. All the good schools within the area, along the East Coast, even into Ohio, come to this tournament.
Yeah, it's certainly the best of the best. I mean, if you can get that notch on your belt, you've done something that you can remember for a long time. Also, Quinn Kinner from Kingsway down here in South Jersey. You know, this is a kid who last year fell in sudden victory in the final, Brett, and he comes back this year, goes all the way through, really kind of dominant, coming off a state championship last year at 132 pounds. What does Kinner do that makes him so tough?
Kinner's just tough. He's aggressive, and he stays on you. He'll never take a rest. 6 minutes, he could probably go about 26 minutes. But an eye-opening win was he beat JoJo Aragona from, name escapes me, but
Pope John.
Yeah, Pope John beat him 10-4 in the quarterfinal and moved on. In the semifinal, he had a 1-0 victory, and then in the finals, he dominated 110, I think it was 11-3 in the finals, major decision in the finals. And Kinner is a kid, now he was committed to NC State, he's gone to Ohio State. As you know, Ohio State's ranked number 2 in the country in college. So, I mean, he's as good as anyone in the country. And I believe right now one of the top pound for pound in the state. Yeah,
and last year when you look at the way Quinn Kinner approached everything, you know, he started out a very good wrestler, but opened things up and started to score, really stay on the offensive, and I think that suited him well as he's gone on here, obviously committed to Ohio State. Definitely the favorite to win that 138 class in New Jersey this season. You know, wrestled all over the country. He's been to Fargo, Super 32s, everything and anywhere. Also, of course, Pat Glory, maybe the best pound-for-pound wrestler in New Jersey from Del Barton, wins.
Third.
Yeah.
Third Beast title. And Pat Glory finally won that elusive state title last year, where he had wrestled and beat Aragona in the finals. And, you know, he took that next step. And right now, he's one of the top wrestlers in the country. He's wrestled in everything in the country, has won everything in the country, and then finally won his elusive state title last year.
Yeah, he's going to Princeton, right?
Yes, committed to Princeton.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the hammer of all hammers on the Del Barton squad, which is, you know, a pretty remarkable team. Let's take a look at some other stuff. What else jumped out to you this weekend when you look, or, you know, in the middle of December here, when we look at kind of these initial tournaments for people to get their feet wet?
Well, something that was really unique and you may not see too often, the top 2 public schools in the state, which is Paulsboro and Howell Township, squared off in the Betty and John VOGEDING Classic in Paulsboro, which was a team tournament, but they met up in 12 of the 14 weight classes, and it kind of came down to like one of the final bouts to see who won with the split. So those teams are right there, they're even, and the funny is, Howell is Group 5, which is the biggest schools in the state, and Paulsboro is Group 1, and one of the smaller Group 1s, and they hung with Howell. It'd be interesting to see if they wrestled in the dual meet, because with the matchups and where they weigh certain kids in and getting the matchups you want. But they went head-to-head a bunch in that tournament, and Howell got them in, I think it was 8 of the weight classes, but it was great. It was great to see that good wrestling action that early on.
Yeah, it's not usually something you'd see in the beginning to see, especially in the dual match. I mean, Beast of the East, obviously an individual tournament, and so is the VOGEDING tournament too, but a small amount of people, a small gym, packed house obviously in Paulsboro always is when it comes to wrestling. Brett, let's take a look at kind of, this first month of the season, what kids have to deal with in terms of coming in flat weight. I mean, before they can get that pound allowance, how tough is that for high school kids?
Now, when the season moves forward, they get 2 pounds allowance, and that 2 pounds it's a huge difference. Because when you have to make flat weight, I mean, that's when you make, if it's 106, you're making 106. At 113, you make 113. And it's tough because you have to certify in at that weight, and you get what's called it's a dissension plan, because you can't have a kid cut 20 and 30 pounds within, a week's time. You have to actually commit to that dissension plan. And for example, if a kid wants to wrestle 106, his dissension plan says the earliest he can make 106 is mid-January, then he has to wrestle 113. And he cannot go up to 120, or else he loses certification for 106. And he can make 106 by mid-January, because that's what the dissension plan says. But then once they move into the season, they get a 2-pound weight allowance. Right. And that kicks in February.
Yeah, so it's a lot of tight scales right now, obviously. I mean, kids are really watching their weight and how it's all going to shake out. When you look at this first month, what are you looking for, Brett? I mean, when you look around the state here, you've been coaching wrestling for a number of years, you wrestled in high school. You go back and look at it, and it's hard to tell too much too soon.
It is, because sometimes you don't know where kids are going to end up or fall in as according to their dissension plan and what they're going to wrestle when the district and regions and states comes. But you're looking for those big matchups, for those athletes to establish themselves for seeds later down the road. I know there's a lot of team tournaments the first weekend, not too many dual meets, but there are some very big dual meets on the horizon. And right now it's about these individuals establishing themselves and finding their seeds for the state tournament.
Yeah, a lot of one-on-one matchups that would go a long way in determining states. I mean, if you could beat a kid who you're going to see in your weight class, certainly look at Kinner, beating Aragona. Then if they were to be there again, obviously Kinner with the state championship last year would be the better seed. But stuff like that can end up determining a lot. And
the great thing about wrestling as a sport is, as it's different than, say, basketball or football, these wrestlers, they can meet at any time during the season. Because of the individual team tournaments, and it's not you're crossing groups. Because a lot of wrestling, it doesn't really take into consideration what a Group 5 school wrestle a Group 1 school. That's just not the way it is. It's, whether that Group 1 school wants to schedule a Group 5 school, and a lot of times they do. But the greatest thing about this sport is it culminates in one individual state title per weight class.
Right. Absolutely. And that's one of the great things about New Jersey and the way they handle it. Down at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, early in March. It's always great, isn't it?
It's a great 3 days of wrestling, and they've expanded the tournament to take the top 4 from the regional. And last year was the first year that they did this, and it was kind of, I'm not sure if it was an experiment, but there was 4 fourth placers that actually placed in the top 8 in the state. So they didn't really make a mistake by letting the top 4 in, because 4 of those top 4 from the region placed in top 8 in the state, which says something.
Yeah, and that's something we'll look at this year, Brett. Certainly there will be a number of weight classes in certain regions that are kind of loaded, and you look at a kid who might come in 3rd or 4th, and you know what, really, that kid might win most of the other regions. Something to look at. Brett, when we come back, we're going to talk about teams and divisions and groups and who we expect to see as team state champions after the end of the year.
All right,
sound good?
Sounds great.
We'll be right back after this.
Hi, I'm Tommy Green, former pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. When I was in high school, it was very important to me to show scouts what I could do. My friends at Payroll Service Solutions are huge supporters of high school sports and the Sports Fan Base Network. If you're a small to medium-sized business in need of a payroll company, contact Payroll Service Solutions. Not only will they take care of you, they will continue to support the community. For more information, contact Payroll Service Solutions at 215-624-0922 or 866-PAY-EASY.
All right, we're back and welcome back. And when we think about wrestling, not only are the individual tournaments so great at the end of the year, but right before that, I think it's 3 weeks before all that gets kicked off with districts, we have the team state championships down in Toms River, and that's always compelling. So we're going to take a look now at some of the teams we expect to be there when the dust kind of settles here. And Brett, let's start with Group 1, the smallest schools. We talked a little bit about Paulsboro. They've won the last 2. I think they've won 30 in their school history. They're usually the team to beat in Group 1. I know Kittatinny's wrestled them the last couple years in the state final. You got to think Paulsboro, like you said, they could be the best public school team, if not one of the top 2 or 3 of them. It's theirs to lose.
This
right?
Paulsboro team that's on the mat this year, maybe one of the best teams in the state, aside from Bergen Catholic, because Bergen Catholic has so many veterans in the lineup. This Paulsboro team, what I saw over the weekend, may be one of the best teams they've had in years. And they're set up for the next 4 years and probably beyond to win state titles. They're just that good.
Yeah, and from 113 to, we'll say 195. I mean, that's 11 weight classes they're going to win most nights.
And you don't see any holes, if any. And even at 106, they have a tough freshman that got down to 106. Lucci, who wrestled he made the finals of the tournament on the December 16th. But it was just to see them wrestle as tough as they did against Hal. I mean, it was a great match. And one of Hal's best wrestlers, Kid Reitzman, at 170, wrestled Brandon Green, who's a sophomore. Both wrestlers are sophomore. And the match came down to a 3-2 decision by Reitzman did prevail. But what a match. It was action-packed. But I will say one thing, and this isn't an excuse for Paulsboro at all, but 2 weeks ago, that whole team plays football.
Yeah.
I mean, and they won the section title. And I'm not sure what Hal's situation is with football and how many of them play football and wrestle, but I could say this. Paulsboro kids, they wrestle, they play football, but when they go right from the football field to the wrestling mat, and 2 weeks ago they're winning a group title, it's hard to get in that wrestling shape. Football shape is a lot different than wrestling shape, but I give Paulsboro credit. None of those kids missed this event, and they all wrestled pretty much. I think there's one kid out of the lineup, and other than that, they wrestled, and they wrestled tough.
Yeah, remember 2 years ago, they won the championship on the last bout against Kittatinny. Last year, they really handed it to them. This year's team is better than last year's, I think, personally, Brett. So that's the team to beat in Group 1 is the Paulsboro Red Raiders from South Jersey. Group 2, more traditional teams we expect to be there. I think you got Del Val, Hanover Park, and a team that you really like as a sleeper there. I don't know how much of a sleeper they are because they won 27 matches last year. But Raritan, tell me about Raritan.
But a sleeper on the state title scene. I think Raritan, they returned 14 kids that wrestled last year, and they were 27-3 last year. They lost in the sectionals, and I think they're poised for a run. With Hanover Park, I think would probably be the toughest team. But another sleeper is Haddonfield. Haddonfield's got a tough lineup, and I think they should win Group 2 in South and make some noise. They could meet up with them somewhere. But Haddonfield's pretty solid all the way. There's not one wrestler that maybe sticks out. Bolentino's tough in the upper weights, but they're just solid all the way up. And of course, there's a Klaus in the lineup, maybe 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, well, that's always the case with Haddonfield. There's always a Klaus. And unfortunately for them, Ben Klaus hurt himself this year playing football. He would have been a big boost to the lineup. But you're right, they bring back a lot. You look at the teams they traditionally have to get through in West Deptford, in Collingswood, some teams that maybe aren't at their strongest additions. And Haddonfield was right there last year. I mean, they lost to Collingswood on the road in the South Jersey Group 2 final. I mean, that was maybe 10 points, maybe less. I mean, it came down to a couple weight classes. So certainly Haddonfield is the favorite in South Jersey Group 2. And if they get there, you're right. I mean, maybe they could sneak up on a team. But I like your pick with Raritan. I think that has some legs. Group 3, 2 teams that are very familiar with the spot, familiar with each other. South Plainfield.
South Plainfield and Delsey.
Delsey
will be back. And Gateway. Gateway's a tough team in South Jersey that could give Delsey some matchup problems.
Right.
But I do expect Delsey to prevail and look for that rematch against South Plainfield. And down the road, we'll talk about who South Plainfield's wrestling in South Jersey, which is a big match.
Yeah, South Plainfield is going to wrestle Paulsboro probably, the Newton Duels.
Yes, they are. No, they're wrestling. It's a scheduled match. They're going to wrestle. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the exact date, but they are going to square off this year.
Yeah, that would be great. With Delsey, they're always there. They get stronger as the year goes on. South Plainfield's a team they're very familiar with. you know, in wrestling, it seems like because the amount of weight classes now, 14, as we both kind of agree, are too many, with the midget programs, it seems like we kind of have the same customers every year. That's the way it goes, right? It takes a couple of years to build something into a name.
And wrestling's a great sport, and it's a little different than it was in years past. You don't just get the numbers. So it is kind of a numbers game. With 14 weight classes, it's a lot of times for some of these teams are just finding a body, finding an athlete. And you could do that in the upper weights. You can find an athlete to help you get by. In the lower to middle weights, really it's tough. It's tough to find an experienced wrestler who just starts in 9th grade and becomes an elite wrestler. But Delsea, Paulsboro, Haddonfield, talking about West Effort, Collingswood, a lot of those teams that are always there in the mix, always have big kids, always have a balanced lineup. And that's the secret to success, is having the big kids, having the good athletes, but having a balanced lineup all the way up and down.
Yeah, and in Group 4, Brett, another team that is no stranger to success. They are always there. They were there last year. We expect them to be there again this year. And you talk about kids that you might have to find some athletes at upper weights. That's not the case at Phillipsburg, man. Those kids were born to wrestle. They grew up wrestling. The state liners are as good as it comes most of the time. And you expect them to be back on top of Group 4, huh?
Absolutely. They eat, they sleep, and they breathe wrestling. And it shows because they're there every year. As far as sectional titles go, what they do is, it's amazing. Because they've been between Group 3 and Group 4 in years past. Now they're in Group 4. They're settled in Group 4. Really, there's a couple teams out there, but no one is up in their level. I know West Marsh. They wrestled West Marsh in the finals last year. They beat them pretty good. West Marsh may be back, but that's another thing. Group 4, they're the team that stands out.
Yeah, Middletown North is also in there, and the team from South Jersey, we talked about Quinn Kinner earlier. You look at Kingsway, they wrestled in the semifinals last year, but this year they'll be moving up to Group 5, and that's a group we're going to touch on after the break. We're going to talk about 5. We're going to talk about the non-public, some of these dominating teams, especially Bergen Catholic, right after this. Group 5 is the biggest public school group that we have, and we mentioned Hal earlier, and they are back with plenty of firepower. But who can challenge them? And you look at it, you know, we talked about Kingsway. Maybe they have enough to be able to compete with them. Southern is also in South Jersey, another contender. What do you think, Brett? If you had to pick one team that you think maybe if they get in a match, things go the right way, they can stay off their back, who can kind of challenge Hal?
Right now, I would say Hunterdon Central. They've been there before. They've battled Hal. They know their lineup. Coaches know the lineups. So last year they battled, they split, and Hal took the state title. That was Hal's only loss, and they avenged it in the state championship. But I wouldn't count Kingsway out. Kingsway still has, their lineup it's balanced until they do lack some experience up top. So if those young kids can come in and hit the ground running, then I think they could challenge Hunterdon Central. Challenging Hal, now that's another feat in its own. But right now, I would say between Hunterdon Central and Kingsway to challenge Hal. But I think Hal, again, is the cream of the crop. And they're the cream of the crop in public school in the whole state.
Yeah, it seems like at this point, really the teams that go out of their way to schedule the tough duels, to be in these individual tournaments with teams that really, they bring a lot of good weight class, like you said, Hal and Paulsboro. If you can get those type of challenges under your belt early, get your kids seasoned, where they know the teams they should beat, they take care of, and then you never know who gets hurt, who gets injured, who misses weight. I mean, when it comes down to it, anything can happen on match day, man.
That's funny. You mentioned injuries or hurt in the lineup. Well, there was a JV tournament that happened on the 15th, day before the varsity tournament. And Hal had about 32 wrestlers in that JV tournament. I think it was a lot of Hal wrestlers wrestling each other. Mm-hmm. But to have that many wrestlers involved, that's a community effort. And wrestling is it's a sport where it's ingrained within the community, and it just success breeds success in wrestling. There's very rarely do you have like a new kid on the block that's able to stay up there and compete with these teams. But make no mistake, Hal is as good as they are because they do have the numbers. They wrestled the best. They've been in that Central Shore area. They don't have the state titles. Last year was the first state title they've won in group history since 1980 when they started the groups. But they won, and they won Group 5. But remember, there used to only be 4 groups. And that central group used to be dominated by Southern or Brick. Right. So for them to come in and win it last year, I do think in the old format they would have won it. But it's touchy. But there's 5 groups. I'm not the biggest fan, but I'll tell you what, Hal's Group 5, they're the best for a reason because they have the numbers, they have the coaching, and they've been there before. And to wrestle in that Central Shore area, the teams like Southern, the teams like Brick Memorial, Jackson, they're always there.
They are always there. And what about the Slendorn kid for Hal? I mean, how good is he?
Now, Slendorn just, last year, he avenged the loss in the state semifinals. He wrestled, it was Nick Duca. Wrestled Nick Duca in the finals of the John and Betty VOGEDING tournament last year. And Duca major decisioned them. I believe it was like 10-0. Well, Slendorn met up with him in the semifinals, and Slendorn just took him apart and beat Duca to make the finals.
He's a tremendous wrestler. They have a number of them. There's no doubt up and down the lineup. So that's about Group 5. It looks like Hal's the team to beat. And then you look at South Jersey with Southern, Kingsway. Maybe they could present somebody. And Hunterdon Central will also be a competitor. Because last year, like you said, it came down to the last bout, I believe, for the Group 5 championship. And the Rebels of Hal, down the shore, took the trophy back. Non-public B, let's start there. It looks like this is DePaul and Pope John. Do you agree with that?
Yes, it's just DePaul every year. They're tough. They're established program. They're always there, and I think they're going to be back again this year. Yeah,
and DePaul has Ricky Cabanillas at 145, and that kid's a stud.
Yes, and he won the Beast.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable performance for him. And Aragona leads Pope John. I mean,
yes,
we'll see Pope John. Pope John has a couple bouts with some South Jersey teams, so we'll be able to get out there and see that. Looking forward to that, and certainly it'll come down to those two. The granddaddy of them all, really, where the power lies in New Jersey, is a non-public. Group A, it's Bergen Catholic, and Del Barton has done a lot to further its program here in recent years, but they're just not on the Bergen Catholic program level, are they?
No, Bergen Catholic is a level on its own. Bergen Catholic only had one champion at the Beast, but they placed in over 9 weight classes. And the Beast of the East is probably the premier tournament in the country. And to place 9 kids in the top 8 is just, it's amazing. And they're not up where Blair Academy is, but they're scratching the surface.
For those of you who don't pay attention to wrestling, Blair Academy is not an NJSIAA sanctioned school, but it is in New Jersey, and it is loaded with great wrestlers, and will probably be one of the best in the country. I remember when we looked at Kinner's bracket in 38 there, we thought Robinson from Blair Academy, he was the 1 seed.
And he got knocked off in the semis.
Yeah, he lost in the semis to a kid from Christiansburg, Virginia, who then Kinner went on and majored in the final. So Blair certainly is talented and loaded and has kids from all over the place. But Bergen Catholic, you look at a guy like Shane Griffith, who lost the state championship last year to Mackay Lewis, who's now at Virginia Tech of Boundbrook. The kid's won 2 state championships. He's lost in the state championship. He's the favorite to win the state championship this year. A guy like Nick Suriano, who didn't lose in his high school career, won 4 state championships, is now at Rutgers after starting at Penn State. Bergen Catholic is just a sight to behold. I mean, really, when you look at scholastic sports in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of how many titles they won and how many kids on the current team have won state titles in place because it's up and down the lineup. And they were also without Josh McKenzie, who is one of the favorites to win a state title, also a football player. But he didn't wrestle in the Beast. I expect him back, but when they're back, wow, their lineup is solid. And down the road, they're going to wrestle in the Who's Number 1 duels at the Palestra over at Penn. So that's something that you don't want to miss.
Yeah, and how loaded is that lineup? At what weight class? They had a state champion, right? Who
they had a state
is knocked out lineup.
A state champion at 152, Gerard Angelo, who was He was a state champion, and he was second in the state last year. And he was beaten out by kid Tony Asatrian. And that Asatrian plays fifth in the Beast. So that's how stacked and loaded a lineup is. When a returning state champ and also second in the state could not crack the lineup.
They wrestled off, and that's what it comes down to a lot of the times. We're going to have a lot all season when it comes down to individual performances, who we're looking at as maybe state champions, maybe dark horses to place Atlantic City, and all that good stuff, certainly. We're going to look at team races all year. We're going to look at how it goes by section. South Jersey, Central Jersey, North Jersey has 2 sections. And we'll talk more about the private schools' domination and what the public schools can do to make it up. A lot of topics in wrestling season, Brett, and it should be a fun one, huh?
It should be great. We're going to cover the whole state. We're going to be thorough. We're going to cover, any from A to Z, and we're going to leave no stone unturned.
That's right. That's what we're here for. For you out there who watch, if you want to get the podcast, you can get it on iTunes, the Sports Fan Base Network podcast. The Pennsylvania Boys Basketball Show will run on Mondays at 7 p.m. Facebook Live. It's called 3 in the Key, hosted by Richie Bleiweiss. Pennsylvania Girls Basketball Show run on Thursday, In the Paint with Nikki Jones. And there's an all-new Varsity Voice this year. That's going to be on Wednesdays. Frankie Stokes will host that. And, if you missed something, if you want to keep up to date, make sure you go to thesfbn.com for more information, shows, and everything else you need. It's a pleasure, Brett. I look forward to being here all winter, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be here all winter.
We're going to stay warm, and thanks for watching On the Mat with the Mat Pack, presented by the Sports Fan Base Network.